Hello, everyone. My name is Isabel Banerjee, and today I have the distinct pleasure of interviewing a very special guest. She's rather well known internationally, but today we have her here on Zoom with us. Let me introduce to you my daughter, Amanda Sheldon.
Hi. So great to finally get to be on the program.
And it's so wonderful to see your face, even though I really wish we were sitting in the same room or at least in the same country. But
Please. Yes.
yeah, as our listeners will find out very soon, we are much closer now than we were a few weeks ago. Now, I'm Isabel Banerjee, and I am the author of Who Am I Now? Feminine Wisdom, Unmasked and Uncensored. And today, I'm excited to be able to share with you some of my daughter's experiences about who she is today, who she has been, and where she has been. So, welcome, Amanda.
Hi.
For everyone out there in TV land, Amanda just moved back from the United Arab Emirates, the UAE, Dubai, to now re-domiciled in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. So Amanda, you have just finished your 2 weeks, your 14 days of quarantine upon re-entry to the country. And it is 10 years since you have been a Canadian resident, excuse me. And I'd love to start our conversation, and I hope that we'll agree to stay together, and we'll do a series of conversations because there's so much to talk about as a woman who has been a citizen of the world and built a career working far, far away from her mom, who missed out of her. So just to set the scene, 2010. I had just gotten married. You came down to the United States to marry me off yet again.
Yet again.
For everybody listening, she said, "This is the last time." And from there, you and I left to join 22, I think, other women on a cruise.
Yes.
A Ken Fattal's cruise in 2010. And immediately from disembarkation is the term in the cruise industry, you got on a plane and you flew to Kuwait.
Correct.
So would you please explain why?
Well, you didn't ship me off there, that's for sure. It was voluntary. Yes, so I would say right around May 2009, I had the opportunity with the company I worked with to meet somebody from Kuwait who was going to carry the franchise of the company that I was employed with. So I met them in Toronto, just had a casual chat and said, if you need some help, would love to go and do it, having no clue about the Middle East and specifically about Kuwait. Fast forward 6 months later, I went on a sightseeing trip with myself and some other colleagues and got the position. And so in the span of 7 months, went from what I thought was going to be a lifetime of working in Toronto to coming to see you and then boarding a plane to go across to Kuwait.
So was this just a temporary contract originally, or?
It was supposed to be a 2-year opportunity. So we were going to, as a group, there were 6 of us that were chosen as brand ambassadors to go and launch this home furnishing brand overseas. Work with this company to kind of instill the values and the business practices of the brand itself.
Mm-hmm.
But getting into Kuwait and meeting the people that I met, I really fell in love with the culture, with the area. And the 2 years passed by so quickly that when the term came up to decide, do we fly back or do I stay, I asked to stay, which is when I came, I guess I would say, a full-time employee with that company. And it really sort of set the scene for what I accomplished over the 10 years.
Did you surprise yourself when you heard yourself saying, "I'd like to stay"?
Yes, absolutely. Um, I have always joked that if you had asked me, at the beginning of 2009, could I ever see myself a year later living in the Middle East, working in a foreign country where I knew nothing about the culture or the language, I would have said no. The furthest I had ever gone was on a vacation to Scotland, and otherwise it was, Mexico was our family vacations.
Oh,
However,
but don't forget those runaway horses in Cartagena.
oh, right. So we did a South America trip. That's a whole other, whole other
That's
segment.
another episode, yeah.
Um, but at the same time, I'm a very ambitious woman, and I could see this was going to be the launch pad for my career.
Mhm.
And I also am not a risk taker, and I like to surprise myself sometimes. So I just went for it without asking too many questions.
Okay, so I'm going to guess that 99% of the population would have said, "Oh, hell no." But
Yeah.
you're a one percenter,
Mm.
and you decided to step off into an entire, not even a new continent and new culture, new everything.
Yes.
When you first arrived, I mean, do you recall what your first kind of feeling was when you touched down in that airport?
Well, I, I will preface it by saying Kuwait's a very Americanized place. So, my first brand that I saw was a Starbucks at the airport, but everything else felt foreign. So, from cultural dress to the way, you ask for a taxi, to all of those things, there is definitely something different than living in North America. So I remember getting settled into my temporary accommodation because the company was putting us up in this, building in the middle of nowhere, and being fine until the next morning when I looked out the window and I was looking at sand. And I was looking at people's laundry hanging from their windows, and the call to prayer, like that woke me up at 4 a.m. So it definitely was that moment where Dorothy says she's not in Kansas anymore. I had that, right off the plane.
I can't even imagine. It would have been very much like being on another planet, especially since I know you as you were always a city girl at your heart, through and through. When I used to drag you off to grandparents' farm, you were like, "No, no," and here you were. You were billeted in a kind of in an outlying area of the city, right?
Correct. However, what I guess made it bearable was I knew from my company at any time that I didn't want to be there, I could go home. So there was that safety net. There
Okay.
were 6 of us, as I said, brand ambassadors who we were all in it together. So you have that camaraderie of being able to say, hey, you're going through this, and so am I. So that support system was there. But also, I think I wanted to prove something to myself that I could do it. And so I, got dressed. They picked me up. I went into the office the first day. And from there, it just got easier because every expat goes through that same culture shock. And so all of my colleagues in my office were there to help me and give me suggestions and, tell me where to live so I wasn't living in the middle of the desert. It was very helpful.
Very good. So, as an expat, did you have some initial training or indoctrination so you could sort of distinguish what was expected culturally of you?
Everything that they sort of preemptively told us,
Yeah.
I would say turned out to be false. Because my notions of living in Kuwait were, women can't drive and women should be covered and, don't look at a man, don't shake hands. All of that was out the window within the first week, where, again, interacting with locals, you could see that actually, no, all of those things were outdated. There is a conservative dress that you follow. There is subtle nuances in terms of hospitality and who you speak to first.
Right.
But I didn't feel that I was going to misstep in any way. I actually probably was more worried because most of the working population there are other expats from other nations. And so it wasn't just Arabic that I was navigating, it was Tagalog, Hindi, Urdu, all these multicultural individuals who work there that also didn't speak English. So I had to learn many languages, not just one.
Phenomenal. So I think, I've been to visit you, lived in Kuwait,
Early on.
and again, when you've been living in Dubai, which is another segment. And so I do understand what you're talking about the more um, expected or westernized environment. But I think the majority of people, at least the people I've encountered for the most part, just, they're thinking it's all camels and burqas and dates, So that is a misconception.
Yes.
Which
There
I'm
are camels, there are dates,
yeah,
there are abayas. I never saw a burqa. Women are fully covered, but there's different names for things.
right.
But that's not what the expat lifestyle is. So there is a parallel community that happens there.
Mhm. So respectful of each other's practices and lifestyles, but more of a supportive live and let live culture, would you say?
Yes, I think especially in Kuwait, the expats outnumber the local population 3-1. So you don't necessarily feel there's an overpowering sense of the Arab or Muslim culture, but there's a respect for it in everything. So the way businesses and companies operate definitely is not just Kuwaitis who are Arab, but there's Egyptians and there are Indian and Pakistani nationals. So that was the one thing I learned was Muslim comes in all forms. It's not just one nationality.
Okay, so when you left Canada,
Hmm.
didn't have any understanding or knowledge of the nuances of different countries, cultures, religions.
No, it
You
was
were immersed.
yes, and I actually, in hindsight, wish I had done a little bit more research, but I think I wanted just to get there and experience it and not perhaps allow media to tell me what I should be expecting because, as I said, the things I learned actually turned out to be the opposite. So, I could shake a man's hand. I could speak to, male staff as a person in power. Um, and there are moments, obviously, again, their cultural biases come out of something true, but it
Right.
definitely, the Western media really focus more on like the Kuwait War and how oil ruled everything, where that's not the case.
Yeah, that's unfortunate that the media attention is focused on the more uh, uh, negative and more clandestine or controversial aspects of a relationship as opposed to what do the day-to-day people do and how do they interact and I share with everybody that as a mother I was worried even though I knew you to be an extremely competent individual and you were 30 years old at the time, but I couldn't help but worry that, oh my gosh, it's so foreign and it's so far. And, what is really the treatment of women? Because in Western society, we're only, the filter is harder than a
Correct.
covering, right?
I will share. So, in my first 2 years, again, my social circle was only people I worked with, and primarily European expats or North American expats.
Mhm.
But it was really after I made that decision to stay on, where I opened myself up to meet other people. And so, most of my close friends are Arab there, but not necessarily local, where they're from Syria or Lebanon, and their families settled in the region and built a life there. So the kids have only known that. And they gave me really a strong perspective on family and what that Arab culture is family and hospitality. So, I loved being able to go to people's houses for celebrations and go to weddings, and just see how culture unfolds so differently, but in how much reverence they have for people.
Would you say that your relationship with the word immigrant and what it means has changed since you went to the UAE?
Absolutely. I mean, and my whole time in the Middle East, I was the immigrant. And yet I had, unfortunately, the way it works, there's a hierarchy to that immigration. But I had that opportunity to see the world from an outsider coming in, and how much pride as immigrants, working immigrants, we had for the countries that support us, which is what I can see happening here when I've, seen Toronto news or North American news. People who move into a new country to start their life really invest everything they have to make that life better, but it also then invests in the country they work with. And they have that pride and sense of ownership to do something better with it. So
it's so beautiful to make that reminder, because it's, now that I'm a citizen in the United States, there's always such a conflict over the topic of immigration and who has the right to be here and who really loves the country. So I'm looking at it from the other side of someone who has made the effort to come to the country and what is their commitment. I want to correct something. I think I misstated something when I said when you move to the UAE. In fact, am I correct? Kuwait is not part of the United Arab Emirates?
no, so it is part of the Gulf region. However, it's a separate country that's about an hour flight between. So the UAE is similar to how I describe Canada with the provinces. So there's 7 emirates that are combined under one leadership, which is why it's called the United Arab Emirates.
Okay, okay, testing your memory now. Could you name all the Emirates?
I can, yes.
Yeah, okay.
And it's only because it's still fresh in my mind because I've seen all of them. But do I win a prize if I do it?
Absolutely. I'm going to send you some camel's milk.
Yeah. Wait, you should put this out to your listeners to see if they can name all 7 of them without looking at Google.
Okay, well, we could make that a challenge and say, yeah, they can respond in the comments, and I'll have you choose a winner. You'll be the judge.
Sure.
The randomly chosen winner will receive a signed copy of Who Am I Now, Feminine, from the author. What?
I don't even have that, so I'm impressed.
That's right. You were out of the country and it wasn't available on Amazon there yet. So I must rectify that. Okay, well, this is just the tip of all of the things that I want to ask you, and to thank you for sharing so generously with my listeners, because I believe, like you, and you've experienced it and lived it, that the more that we know about each other and other cultures, and how we can relate to the female population in other areas, it gives us such a tremendous advantage. And I think it's us girls in the world that are going to make it a better place to live. So, parting questions. For one, what is something that you really missed from Canada when you touched down 10 years ago in the Gulf region?
Ooh, so I missed ketchup flavored potato chips because
Mhm.
that is not something in the Middle East. They enjoy spicy flavors instead. So
Okay.
that was the first purchases I made, and I regretted it the next day.
All right. So ketchup potato chips. Did you get some since you moved back to Toronto?
I have, yes.
Good, good. Anything else that you remember now really missing?
Um, well, my time in Kuwait was different because obviously there's less on offer there, whereas in UAE, I had, I could have pork if I wanted it.
Right.
But that is definitely your home cooking. I will say I missed that the most.
Oh, nice. That and maybe bacon.
Well, no, I could have bacon. Let me say that I could have it, but I often felt guilty because I knew my friends were not eating it. So I waited till I got here to have it.
All right. And that's respectful. That was very kind of you. And what would you have brought back from Kuwait to Toronto with you if you had no luggage restrictions?
Ooh, that's a good one. I don't know, because I found that in my time there, everything I had was more of a memory. So I think when coming back, if luggage wasn't a restriction, I would have brought several of my friends with me because that's what I miss now.
Nice.
Being here, the distance is there.
Yeah.
I don't think they'd like being smuggled in a suitcase, but
No,
say la vie.
they might have had to travel with Coco, your cat, in the special luggage.
Oh my goodness, that's a whole other segment too, traveling with pets.
Okay, we'll hold you to that because I think there's a lot of people would appreciate your insight and your experience on being an expat and a woman traveling with her cat. So let's wrap this segment now and come back. And in the next segment, I'd like to talk more about the misconceptions that we have from different parts of the world and your experience, let's say, with fashion and accommodation and travel within the region. Oh, and maybe outside the region, because there's a couple of exotic destinations we can reveal. So thank you. Stay tuned, everybody, for the next episode. Bye for now.